Not that long ago, the term gaming projector would have been considered both setup and punchline for a pretty funny joke. Spending thousands for an undeniably subpar gaming experience isn't exactly an option worth shouting about. But with this, the BenQ X500i, it might actually be worthwhile compared to an awful lot of TVs, especially if you have the space to go big with it. Even for pretty regular sized rooms, you can get considerably larger than TV sized screens. You only need about 5 feet or 1.5 meters between the projector and the wall to get a 100-inch screen. Or if you've got more room to spare, a little bit more like 8 feet or 2.4 meters gets you a whopping 150-inch frame. You can't beat that with a TV. The X500i has a rather impressive set of specs. This is a true 4K projector that BenQ claims is specifically made for gaming. This should output around 2,200 lumens, or about 650 nits, which for a projector is pretty decent from its 4 LEDs. Now, if you think that that's RGBW, you'd be wrong. Apparently this is RGBB, to, according to BenQ, enhance color saturation, resulting in vibrant and lifelike imagery. We'll see about that. It's also meant to cover 84% of the DCI-P3 spectrum, which, while not amazing compared to a bunch of even gaming monitors these days, is pretty great for a projector. You also apparently get a 1350:1 contrast ratio, which again, for a projector, is pretty decent. The fancy feature of it is really its ability to scale its refresh rate depending on the resolution. With almost every other display, the maximum refresh rate is all you get, regardless of if it's running at 4K or 144p. This, however, will run at 4K 60, or 1440p 120, or 1080p 240. Yeah, this will do 240Hz at 1080p. That's pretty sweet. Now, before I show you the high-speed footage, I do want to note that this flashes like mad, and I'll explain why in a second. So if you are photosensitive, this is a big warning to skip ahead. Right, here's the clip. You can see that the frog is moving every 4 frames. That's around 4 milliseconds, or right around 240 Hz. It is genuinely running at 240 Hz, and the response times are instant too. That's amazing. The reason it's flickering so much, and why I can't use it for too long, is because this is a 4 LED DLP projector. Let me explain. Not all that long ago, projectors used both a filament-based bulb and a liquid crystal panel to display their images. The bulb sucked. It ran insanely hot, it wasn't able to get super bright, and needed replacing regularly. So we replaced it with an LED. That was smaller, much more efficient, often brighter, and didn't need replacing. It was just a much better option. The LCD still kinda sucked though. See, LCDs can't block out 100% of the light that shines through them or onto them. We see that with monitors all the time, especially with IPS panels, where without local dimming enabled, the panel is visibly grey when it should be fully black. Now imagine a 2000 lumen LED trying to shine through it. Yeah, not great. So you get a terrible contrast ratio, which means the images look washed out and you never get close to the deep blacks you would want for really appealing content. So, with the help of Larry Hornbeck of Texas Instruments, we created DLP, Digital Light Processing. DLP projectors could reasonably be called micro mirror projectors, because the DLP chips are just that. An array of microscopic aluminium mirrors on top of a silicon machine. It's a type of chip manufacturing called MEMS, micro-electromechanical circuits. This is a really cutting edge field where you can design mechanical devices at micrometer scale. In this case, there is an array of 8.3 million tiny mirrors that sit on top of an electromechanical circuit that can move the mirror independently, or each mirror independently, to reflect different amounts of light for each pixel. It is truly insane, but it means that the projector can get a much better contrast ratio and has functionally instant response times too. As for the reason why this thing flickers so much, well, there is only one rather expensive DLP chip in here. So the red, green and double blue LEDs take turns to display the component parts of the frame one after another. It's the same way a plasma display works, flashing one color's worth of the image, then another, and your brain does a wonderful job of smushing those together to give you a complete color frame. That does mean that none of my usual display analysis tools work properly, like the Spider X2 just outright doesn't work, and my very own response time tool, well actually, that kinda does work, and I am really impressed.
It's doing it! I didn't think it would do it, because it's flickering. You probably can't see it on that camera, but it is flickering. It's flickering red, green, and then blue. It is doing it!
Yeah.
What does the gamma curve look like? Wow, the gamma curve is actually pretty sensible. Wow! Wow, okay. So wait, what were some of the ones that did work? 0 to 102. Ah, yeah. Okay. I mean, that's technically right.
The results aren't all that useful. A lot of them failed to process, somewhat understandably, but because the tool is agnostic to light color, it still gives us a somewhat usable output, at least to understand what the projector is doing. At 1080p 240Hz anyway, although I did test this at 4K 60 as well, you get functionally instant response times. In one color anyway. There won't be any ghosting, much like an OLED, but of course the full color of the frame is spread out evenly between the frame type. That does mean that, at least as far as I'm aware, adaptive sync does not work here. It's very much fixed at the refresh rate that it's set to, and hence why all of the sub-refresh rates I think are multiples of 1360. Still, I can't argue that this is an incredible gaming experience. It's remarkably smooth, and being able to run at 240Hz makes for a pretty fast gaming experience. Even fast-paced games like Siege worked incredibly well and felt amazingly immersive. While I would imagine that more things like local multiplayer games or more story-driven games might make more sense for this kind of setup, the fact that basically any genre plays incredibly well shows how good this is. One thing BenQ highlights both on their specs page and in the reviewer's guide is the input lag, or actually lack thereof. Funnily enough, in the comparison table that they included, they purposely round up the competitor's product, despite otherwise being the same result. Anyway, what they're saying here is that their projectors have 1 frame of input lag depending on the refresh rate that you select. That is actually perfectly good and what I expect from most gaming displays. And luckily, since OS RTD is so well designed, it can actually test that. The results that I got were between 2 and 3 frames at 240Hz, which is on the slower side for a gaming display, but for a projector is incredibly impressive. They do have a warning though, or a little sort of pop-up that says for the best results and the lowest latency, you shouldn't use any digital zoom or keystone corrections. Now, I'm not using digital zoom, seeing as it has a manual zoom lens fitted anyway that you can adjust, as well as manual focusing, but I am using keystone corrections for my rather temporary setup, so that might be adding some delay. I actually wanted to find out, so I ran the test again with no keystone corrections, and I confirmed that, yeah, the latency drops to the claimed around 4 millisecond range at 240 Hz. It seems your mounting position is going to play an important choice here. I should mention that the X500i has two HDMI 2.0 ports on the back, alongside a USB-C port for DisplayPort inputs, plus actually a hidden mini HDMI port in this little cubby at the back for the included Android TV box. This is a rather interesting choice, because essentially this means that you can replace this Android TV box with a new one when it inevitably stops getting feature and security updates, or otherwise just becomes too slow and laggy to want to use. Instead of it being built into the projector, essentially dooming the projector along with it, I think I'd like this design choice. And the fact that it comes in the box is good, rather than the sort of what seems to be the more commonplace thing of nickel and diming you at every step. I should also mention that you do get an RS-232 serial port on the back for control with, I must admit, a fully documented control scheme, or if that isn't your style, you can use the included remote. That is actually a rather sleek affair with light up buttons, and works both as a controller for the projector and as a remote for the Android TV box that pairs through the projector. The projector also has IR receivers on the top and on the front, so it should be able to pick up your inputs from anywhere you want it. Lastly, I should also mention that this has two 5-watt tremolo speakers built in, which actually sound pretty good. Although really, if you're spending this much on a projector, I would hope you have some good quality external speakers to use instead. On the note of sound, well, I had this running at the start of the video, but I had to turn it off, and I think you can hear why. This isn't exactly silent. Now, it's a lot better than projectors of old, and if I'm honest, when I had it set up in my office downstairs, projecting at the wall, I didn't really notice it. The fact that I am sat under a foot away from it right now, in fact the microphone is under a foot away from one of the two fans that are built in, that is probably one of the bigger problems here. There is also a bit of a high-pitched whine to it, but when it is mounted in a sort of further away location, you really don't hear it, and so I'm not so worried about that. I am, however, going to turn it off again. Now, while there is plenty more that we could talk about with this, I would recommend that you check out some more seasoned projector reviewers who are more likely to have the right equipment to test and measure how good this thing truly is and how it compares to its competitors. I can tell you that this is one hell of a experience though. The colors look vibrant, rich, and do offer a decent amount of contrast. I mean, it's no OLED obviously, but it's on par with a good IPS panel for sure, at least in a darker room. The image is beautifully sharp, or at 1080p 240 Hz is incredibly smooth and responsive, and that combination of options makes it an incredibly impressive bit of kit. BenQ expects you to part with around £1,500 for this bad boy, which, I mean, if you're comparing it to a lot of new TVs, that isn't all that insane of a price point. And you have to admit that it's a rather unique experience that, at least in some areas, a TV just can't match. Now, personally, I still think I would rather have a QD OLED TV instead, especially one with a good game mode. But if you don't mind sticking a projector screen up for a 100-inch TV setup, this might not be a bad shout. Of course, with that said, those are my thoughts, but I would love to hear yours in the comments down below. Is this something that you consider replacing your TV with, or would you rather go with, just something on the cheaper end, or something like a QD OLED instead? Let me know in the comments down below. Of course, I will leave a link to this in the description if you're interested, and there's also a load of other links in the description, including to my open source response time tool that can sort of test projectors, although that's not a guaranteed function. Just Putting that out there. Otherwise, if you want to see more videos like this one, you can hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell notification icon. You can check out plenty of other videos on the end cards. And as a little sneak preview, I just got Acer to agree to send me a very similar projector. So I might actually have a point of comparison soon. If you want to see that, like I said, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you stay tuned. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you all in the next video.